Welcome to Leadership Reimagined, where game-changing conversations are reshaping the world of work. I am Janice Ellig, the CEO and founder of Ellig Group, Executive Search Advisors, where we are reimagining search through our long-standing commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm delighted to welcome Suzanne Yoon, the founder and managing partner of Kinzie Capital Partners, who is joining us today. A trailblazer in the traditionally male-dominated private equity world, her long-standing vision has been to advance the use of technology, data analytics, and innovation in lower middle market companies in the manufactured products, consumer, and business services industries. In 2017, Suzanne launched Kinzie Capital Partners, a Chicago-based private equity firm, which provides its portfolio of companies with strategic guidance and expertise focused on financial, operational, and technology improvements to eliminate inefficiencies, unlock business opportunities, and create sound investments. Prior to founding Kinzie Capital Partners, Suzanne spent 20 years with financial services companies, investing in and advising middle market companies. Suzanne believes in the power of diverse experiences and champions this belief by serving on several private company boards and civic board service, such as at the National Philanthropic Trust, the Council of Korean Americans, and the board of HFS Chicago Scholars. Additionally, under her leadership, Kinzie financially supports 55 community organizations. She is the recipient of many awards, and I will highlight just two. Suzanne was recognized by the Wall Street Journal as a top female dealmaker shaping private equity's present and future. And Mergers and Acquisitions named Suzanne and Kinzie to their 2021 top 25 most influential women in middle market M&A, recognizing influential deal makers who are also champions of change and advocates for DEI. Suzanne, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Janice. I'm really excited to be here. I have actually listened to some of your podcasts, and I'm so honored to be in this group of amazing leaders that you've had on your podcast.
Well, you're an amazing leader. And I understand you are deeply connected to the Chicago community, obviously, by all that you're contributing to those organizations. But in fact, the origin of your firm's name is connected to Chicago's history. What is that story?
Kinzie is a Chicago-based private equity firm that invests in lower middle market companies in manufacturing, consumer, and business services industries. I founded Kinzie in 2017 as one of the few private equity businesses in the nation to be founded and led by a woman. And while being female-led is one of our, I would say, unique qualities at Kinzie, we have a lot of, many other factors that really separate us from the competition. And, for one, we have a great partnership with a technology firm called Clarity Partners. And then I also tell my team to think of every day like we're going to the Super Bowl. And to stand out in a business where so many people are intelligent and driven, we really have to out-strategize our competitors and deliver the best results for our investors. And so as I thought about that, one of the most iconic landmarks in Chicago is actually the Kinsey Bridge. Kinsey Bridge was built in 1909 as the first bridge over the Chicago River. And many Chicagoans know the Kinsey Bridge because it provides one of the most beautiful and iconic views of the entire city. But you can also look at it and see the history of the city and the progress and new innovation that has come out of Chicago. And that's really what we're trying to, emulate, through Kinzie Capital Partners. It's just a reminder of how important tradition and stability is, even in an ever-changing world.
And I was recently in Chicago, and it was absolutely beautiful. So what a nice way to, promote your firm in terms of the history, but also the innovation. Tell us about your upbringing, your education, who really influenced you to go into this field that is not dominated by women, it's dominated by men.
Yes, so many people have influenced me, but I think where I would start with the influencers in my life are obviously my parents. I'm the daughter of South Korean immigrants and the oldest of four. I was brought to the United States when I was just a baby, and my parents were clearly very entrepreneurial and adventurous. My mother was a nurse, and my father was an engineer and then entrepreneur. Early on in my life, he borrowed money from friends and family and opened his first business, which was a deli in a neighborhood called Cicero in Chicago, which is a very working class neighborhood. And some of my earliest memories are really working alongside him and stocking shelves in exchange for candy bars.
Oh my goodness.
So my father would definitely have called me like his girl. I was definitely a dad's girl. And he was always very encouraging to me. And I think even within a male dominated society, just always knew that I would be my own person and made sure that I knew that I could be my own person. And tragically, when I was 10, my father, he was 38, was actually killed in an armed robbery. And, my sisters were 5 and 3. My mother was only 35 and she was 4 months pregnant with my baby brother. And so overnight, my mother became a single parent. Our entire world was turned upside down and I became the second parent. And so I think my mother was working double shifts as a nurse, made sure that we prioritized education, that I went to a great high school that led me then to University of Iowa, which is our joined alma mater. And
we share that. Yeah.
And, she did everything she could to help us belong. But I think I always felt like I was on the outside kind of looking in wherever I went. But I always had great mentors. And I think back to every point in my life, it was friends' parents. One of my friends' parents was the CEO of a public company. And just being able to see that those things were possible really, helped me focus on what I wanted to do in life. And then, the other fun fact, I think, is that I was very influenced by 80s and 90s movies. I was influenced a lot by the John Hughes movies and movies like Pretty Woman and Wall Street. And I think that was my first exposure really to the concept of private equity. When I went to University of Iowa, I knew that I ultimately wanted to get into finance. I also took a entrepreneurship class there where I was, I think, very inspired to think kind of outside the box. And I graduated from there and ended up joining a global bank to start my finance career. And then, from there, now 25 years later, here I am at Kinsey.
It was the John Entrepreneurial Studies program that is celebrating his 25th year this year, which is, he's a phenomenal entrepreneur. And you learn so much from that and going into the banking and financial services and investing in companies. But what led you specifically into the PE world?
One, I had exposure to private equity very early because I went through a rotational program at ABN AMRO Bank and LaSalle Bank, which was a Midwest headquartered bank that was owned by ABN AMRO globally. And I went through an analyst program and I did rotations through various groups. And I ended up in a group called Special Assets. And in the 90s, that was where the off-balance sheet private equity portfolio was held of the bank. And so it was my first exposure to private equity, which also meant a lot of, changes, turmoil, but also second chances for companies and really being what it meant to be a fiduciary of a company, making sure that we were managing operational changes and bringing in the right consultants. What really intrigued me was the effort that we put in is the value that, sometimes it wasn't always that way, but most of the time, what I learned was great effort usually turns into great results. And I think it was a unique asset class where we could really roll up our sleeves, work hard, and really affect a lot of change and value creation.
So you saw that you could actually make an impact on some of these companies and turn them around. Now, this could not have been easy for you in those early days and even now later on. It is male dominated. So you're one of the few female minority-owned firms out there. What were some of those challenges that you had, as well as opportunities? We don't want to just say it was all challenges, right?
I would just say it always, when you're breaking into something that's new, and I came from a entrepreneurial family and obviously a family who had mostly their career was in medicine. It was very new to me. And, I had executives at LaSalle Bank and future companies that I worked for that really gave me a chance. They saw potential. They were willing to put in the time and energy through an analyst training program, training, mentoring. I had great mentors, and they all happened to be men. And so I think there's this, I'm very grateful for them because private equity is an apprenticeship business, and there's really no way to learn it without being in it every day. You can't learn it in school, but people have to give you a chance. Culturally at Kinsey, we believe in that too. We know that it's an apprenticeship business and we have to put in effort. It has to go both ways. So you have to want it really bad as the person who's being the apprentice. And you also have to be focused and dedicated to putting in the time as a manager to develop your apprentice. So I'm really fortunate that I had that. With that said, it's very lonely. I think, being one of the few women, early in my career to kind of break into private equity and investing, I was always the only woman and then many times also the only minority. And so I had a little bit of a double whammy going in. And so when I say I always felt like I was a little bit on the outside, and of course the challenges that most women I speak to, most executive women I speak to face, like when you are the most senior woman in a room and people turn to your junior partner or vice president who's a male and address them as the boss, or being asked to take a coat or coffee, not really understanding I'm one of the professionals,
right?
There, yeah. And so, those are also opportunities to show up.
Right.
And I have found throughout my career, when you are prepared, and I think that's one of the most important things is I went to all my meetings prepared. And when you open your mouth and you present, facts and people, a lot of times the energy in the room would change immediately as I started talking because it was clear who was the most senior person in the room.
Tell me how you position Kenzie to be different in this field in terms of you're using technology to make these more value-added companies. You're changing some of these companies, right? So how are you different from other PE firms?
What we do well is we're identifying within the industries that we know, companies that are primed for growth, but usually facing some sort of transition. So whether that's a generational transition or they don't really know how to get to the next level, or they need to put in more operational changes and need a partner to figure that out. We have created Kinsey Formula. Our Kinsey Formula is accelerated value, is a function of capital operational improvement compounded by technology. I think that's really our biggest differentiator is that we have in the lower middle market developed a very unique strategic partnership with a group that has 150 plus professionals that are focused on enterprise level companies and in the market every day doing very, very complex technology improvements and implementations and bringing that to the lower middle market and really having operators and advisors that we're partnered with that also bring functional and industry expertise to the companies that we're investing in.
How many companies are you invested in right now?
5 platform companies, 2 of which are control investments. And they've done very well, and we're just we're a pretty new firm, so we just completed we're continuing to invest out of our first fund, and we're really looking. We've gotten great momentum in the market, and so we're looking to do a lot more in the future.
Yeah, you're only 2017, so it's 4 years in, and again, it's manufactured products, it's consumer, and business services are your main areas where you're investing in those companies. Suzanne, we're going to learn more about you and Kinsey, but I want to just remind our audience you are listening to The Power of Diversity in Private Equity with Suzanne Yoon, founder and managing partner of Kinzie Capital Partners. The topics we cover, like today's, are all current, and a new topic with a new game changer is released on the third Thursday of every month. This is a great way to stay current on relevant issues happening around us. Now let's return to Suzanne Yoon. You obviously have learned a lot and lessons in terms of starting your business as an entrepreneur and building it from scratch. Again, not too long ago, 2017. What are some of those lessons that you've learned that would be helpful to others?
Starting the firm was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life, and also the most rewarding. I would say at a high level, the lessons I learned was you have to be prepared. Being an entrepreneur is a huge sacrifice, and not just for you as the entrepreneur and the people who are around you, but your family. And I'm really fortunate that I had my partner and my children who were really supportive of the whole process, even though it was very hard.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't see me very often.
And you have 3 boys, right?
I have 3 boys. They're
It's
14,
not easy.
14, 12, and 5.5. My youngest just started kindergarten yesterday. And I can't believe how fast the time goes. I came from a family, I mentioned I came from a family of entrepreneurs. And so, starting the firm, although it was very difficult, I always knew I really wanted to control my own destiny and build a company and firm around a culture that I could be proud of. And so I think to be an entrepreneur and start a business, and also, be a very good control investor. You have to be passionate about the businesses that you're invested in. You have to be passionate about, what you do as an entrepreneur. I mentioned this before, but I really wanted to have the opportunity to be innovative, and which is reflected, I think, in a lot of the decisions that I've made, particularly related to hiring. And you have to be really thoughtful. So building a firm is not just about you. I mean, yes, I'm the CEO, I'm the managing partner, I'm the chair of boards. I'm also the head janitor, the head of HR, the head, group psychologist. So there's just a lot that goes into that, and you have to really care about your people.
Thinking about private equity, when I think about boards, they're not very, in the private equity field particularly, it's really astoundingly low, worse than the corporate boards, the publicly traded companies. And so and I know you've been, recognized as a champion of change and a champion of GEI. How are you building that into your own firm and into the firms that you're investing in, where you're making sure that not just on those boards, but in the C-suite as well, there's diversity of thought, there's a diversity in terms of gender, ethnicity. How do you think about that, Suzanne?
So I think it is core to not just who Kinsey is in our firm culture, because we do believe in diversity, and really, really driven by the idea of diversity of thought. And so it's core to us, but you're correct. There is not diversity on private company boards. A lot of that happens to be because of, I mentioned this earlier, but private equity is an apprenticeship business. So if there are not more women and minorities that start early in their careers, they can't grow into partners and board members and private company board chairs. So we really have to, as an industry, be very focused on making sure we're attracting women, people of color, and not just because it's the right thing to do, but it is, financially responsible to do that, because we have found that diversity actually does create better results. And there's so many studies that show that. And so, I also just want to note, I don't think about diversity always just of gender and race, but it is important. It's also just about people's experiences and making sure that different experiences are coming to the table. So as we think about our boards, by the nature of the makeup of our team, our boards tend to be, are very diverse, because I'm on the board. My partner, who's also Asian American, sits on boards. But we bring in outside board members that have different perspectives, and we spend a lot of time thinking through functional expertise and also industry expertise, and always looking for the best people. So not our friends, not our buddies, just people that we are continually networking with. And they happen to be women, immigrants who are first generation Americans coming from different places. And we also make sure that that is a focus at our portfolio companies. And it's something that I know when we are in a competitive environment, sitting across the table from management teams who have choices, because these are good companies that we're acquiring, they know that it's important to us. And so we're on the same page usually, before we even close a deal, that we know. And I've had so many executives and management teams of these lower middle market companies say, we know it's important, don't know how to do it. And, I think that's one of the values that we bring as a private equity investor, is to help them think about that, not just think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but really implement those processes, within their own company, within the companies that we're acquiring.
And then how it's going to make a difference to that company if they can look across the table and see people who look like them, basically diversity,
Yes.
They know that you're going to have their best interests at heart too, because it has been proven over and over again, many, many studies in terms of just diversity of thinking, but diversity also of gender, ethnicity. It may take longer to make the decision, but, if you read the book by Michael Page, professor at the University of Michigan, The Difference, he says, for more complex decisions that have to be made, a more heterogeneous, less skilled group makes better decisions than a more skilled, homogeneous group. So, you think about all of those studies that are showing that, you say, why wouldn't we go that way? So if companies can look to you and say, you're going to help them with more value creation.
And that just makes so much sense from a business standpoint, because we know that north of 85% of household purchasing decisions are made by women. We know that the demographics in the United States are diverse, and purchasing decisions of the consumer, the labor of the United States is diverse. And so our boards really, even at the private company level, need to reflect the ultimate consumer and the people that we are serving and the labor forces that we're serving. That's really what's going to drive it. And by the way, in addition to that, the world is global. We're having supply chain issues everywhere because we buy from all over the world. And so it's important to have diversity on your teams, as buyers, as suppliers, so that, we can communicate globally.
So let's turn a little bit to your philanthropic efforts, your community involvement. You're contributing to 55 different organizations, I guess mainly in the Chicago area. So financially supporting them and also being on not-for-profit boards. What drives this in you to put in that time, put in the effort, put in the money?
I think this is the 55 organizations are actually organizations that are our employees and other, people around us are involved in. And so we like to support their activities. And so that's really where the number of the high number of organizations really comes from, because we believe in community engagement. And I think it's paramount for leaders, and that's who we're trying to develop at Kinsey, our future leaders, future board members, right, future investors, that they understand that leadership is not just about your paycheck and what you do within your company, but also what you give back to the community. And so there's a handful of organizations that we are really focused on, but we, I think a lot about what that means. And it also keeps us connected. It keeps us connected to what's actually happening in the world, the economic impact of different communities and also globally, particularly when there are many, recently moments of crisis in the world and in our backyards, and how we take, how we react to that as leaders is is so important, because if we don't do it, who's going to do it?
So it sounds like a lot of your upbringing comes out in what you're doing today, not just professionally, but personally, in terms of investing in communities, investing in your people, and really showing that you care about the planet going forward. So if somebody wanted to start their own private equity firm and follow a little bit your lead, what type of advice would you give to them in terms of how to start, how to do this?
Oh, it takes so much. I would say the first is have a great investment thesis. Know what you want to bring to what is going to be your competitive advantage, and be prepared. I started to talk about this, but preparation is everything. It is extremely competitive. Being in private equity, it's competitive to win deals and win over management teams. It's competitive to convince investors to invest in you as a first-time fund. In many ways, it's like climbing Mount Everest. And so you have to prepare. Like, you wouldn't go and climb Mount Everest and just say, oh, I can do this, right? You would prepare for years and make sure that you're ready for all of the challenges that are along the way. And then I think really the third is you have to be really passionate and believe in what you are doing and be bold, because it's scary. It's scary, but you have to have confidence and courage to get through the tough parts, because there are a lot of tough moments in starting a business, as you know, Janice.
But we stick with it. And I think what you said is the passion and always preparing, as you said in the beginning, to play in the Super Bowl, and you're telling your team this all the time. So they're following your lead. And I think what you've done, though, Suzanne, is really remarkable on the not-for-profit boards that you've been on as well. If you want to chat about that a little bit, because that makes a difference to society, and it also makes a difference in terms of who you are, and companies that maybe want to go with you are looking at how you're impacting the not-for-profit world as well as the for-profit world.
My mother and father planted that kind of philanthropic seed in me very early, even though they really did not have much early in their lives. They were always really generous with people around them. And my father always believed in giving people a chance. And so, when I was young and we didn't have much, my mother and father always made it a point to share. And, I think this has kind of transferred into my adult life. And frankly, I have been the recipient of so much kindness throughout my life, and people who have given me a chance, and having opportunities like scholarships, to be able to get through different programs. And so, the time that I spend on not-for-profit boards, not only is it just my time of giving back, but I learned so much from the organizations that I have been involved with. And actually, philanthropic board work really has expanded my knowledge of governance in general, such as the National Philanthropic Trust Board, and having, being on a board with incredible, not only business leaders, but incredible civic leaders. And, really trying to make a change. And I do think philanthropy juxtaposes very well to my passion for innovation, because I think philanthropy is really hope for the future and creates a lot of innovation. People follow, philanthropy is like where everything starts. And then governments follow philanthropy.
So when people want to learn more about you and your company, how do they go about that?
So I am on LinkedIn, and, my website, Kinzie Capital Partners, is www.kinzie, KinzieCP.com. And so you can learn more about Kinsey there. And also you could Google me and see some of my interviews, and also other team members of mine as well.
Suzanne Yoon, thank you so much for your inspiring story and being a trailblazer for other women in this very important field of, bringing value to companies and making them more efficient and us to invest in them. So thank you very much for your personal story, your professional story, and all that we now share in the not-for-profit world and in our alma mater. So thank you for being with us today, and we will be hearing more about your investments and your companies in the future, and we'll be looking for you on YouTube as well.
Thank you, Janice. Really excited to have been here with you today.
And to our audience, thank you for tuning in to another game-changing conversation on Leadership Reimagined, released on the third Thursday of each month. You can find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, or visit our website at elliggroup.com. Thank you very much for joining us today, and we will be listening to Suzanne Yoon in the future in Kinzie Capital Partners. Thank you.